I bring news. Stag billows.
My name's Claire Millage. I'm an artist based in Warrang, Sydney, and I'm standing here in my installation for the Biennale of Sydney Revis, and the installation is called Imbus, a well at the bottom of the sea. When I decided to work on this project and to use the story of the River Shinnon as a point, it became very important to me to involve a lot of the voices that have inspired me. So whether that's the voices of ecologists or voices of poets or songwriters and their connections to the water as well. So the installation that we're standing in is a huge section of silk that has been sewn together. The silk is all known as peace silk, which is a silk that the silkworms are allowed to live their natural cycle in. So a lot of commercial processes use processes where the silkworms actually die as part of that, but this is a much more kind of ethical process. So the silk was hand dyed by myself and a friend, an artist, and we used a traditional fermented indigo vat, which means like we get a big barrel and we put a lot of indigo powder and sugars and things and create a natural, it's like a giant beer almost, but big blue beer, and then we kind of hand dyed the silk in it, and that's why it's kind of got all of these different variances in colour and texture. And this sort of silk shroud that sort of we're in also contains a series of glass paintings. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 glass paintings here. And they're all suspended from natural shipping rope. And the hardwood frames are made from reclaimed timber, which is a mountain ash from the Blue Mountains. And they've been sort of lashed to the shipping rope with some Prussic ropes. So it's quite an unusual way of hanging the work. But I really didn't want to use traditional walls in a space like this because we are here on the water at Pier 2-3, and I wanted to have that connection to the place and that feeling of suspension and lightness in the work. So we've also got these cauldrons which are located around us, and each cauldron represents one of the magical musical hazel trees that was in the story of Shinnon, in the story of the River Shinnon. And from each of those 9 hazel trees, the hazelnuts fell down, and the fish in the well eat the hazelnuts and release sort of wisdom into the air. And that's how the story of the Shinnon sort of evolves, is that Shinnon, this wonderful woman, comes to release this inspiration and knowledge to the rest of the community, and it has previously been jealously guarded. So she comes, and when she comes, the fish rise up and they release all that inspiration and knowledge and poetic inspiration particularly, and that flows and becomes the river. So we have these sort of points that represent that story, and within the sound installation itself we have a lot of specially commissioned poems. So there's a soundtrack by the French artist Felicia Atkinson, and she's used one of the poems, the old Irish poems that I was studying. And we also have a track by the artist Carla Del Forno, who's responded to the work. We've got some old poems by the activist and Wiradjuri poet Kevin Gilbert that you'll hear occasionally, and also a couple of his poems, Earth, Summit and Tree, are hanging on the outside of the installation for people to read as they pass through. So poetry is a very important part of the work. We also have an artwork by Snack Syndicate and Tom Smith, which is poetic but musical, and a poem by Tess Alice. The way that that is structured is in relation to the tidal depth of the harbour. So when the water in the harbour is more full, then the frequency of the fieldwork recordings, the play of that is is higher. So the more sound that you hear in the installation, the higher the tidal depth in here. So at times it will become quite multi-layered as the harbour fills with water. There's a couple at the back there that, you know, they have quite a strong blue tint to them, but normally in my work I have it up sort of, there's not as much light coming through, so this is the first time I've had the opportunity to really kind of like open the works up to the light and kind of play with that quality inside this building. There's definitely something about women's voices. So one of the reasons I chose Shinnin is that, you know, in all areas of our lives, women's voices are not heard as much as they should be, and even in something like ecology. So when I did the fieldwork recordings, which I wasn't able to personally do, I had to ask my father to make the recordings. And you know, it's very rare that the women's voices are heard. It's much more often that somebody would ask my father to speak, or another man to speak, or that we go along to a lecture or something by a man in this field. So I really wanted the women's voices to be heard. So I have included as many women's voices in this installation as I could, and yeah, and most of the connections that I have here in the installation, most of the artists and participants and ecologists are all connected to my family. We have like social connections to them, so they haven't necessarily just been randomly found.